music concert. So promoters simply can tell you no. Even if there is 10 of you, for example, attending an event and you really need that, they can simply say no. And there are organizations like Make-A-Wish or charities that can facilitate that only, which is really wrong. So you will see a lot of Canadians actually travel to America because that's where, for college and university, because that fell out, you know, this is not a service you're doing for me, it's their right. And that's the difference between when that becomes my right versus when you're giving me as a charity or as a service. And that affects people to move to places they are. The second way that these initiatives get really successful is grassroots initiatives. Means a person with autism or neurodiverse difficulties start to have their own business only for people who have that. That issues. And I think that's a real success rate that goes to if a DJ that has autism start to have their own a space for neurodiverse audience. Or for example, I think we've got a Deaf UK as well, Deaf Rave UK, because there was a deaf person who has started to put all the different institutions together to make it work. So that's another way that it gets, it start to work out, and social innovation or somehow accessibility in that way start to work out. Then going to see what future looks like. So if you have an idea or if you have a demand in a way that you see that something as your right and is not really being cared for and you want to start the movement, the best way is you always co-designing with people who are affected. The previous panel, they mentioned about thinking about students' access, but are they ready really? So last year we worked with a jazz band in High Wycombe area, Box area, called Catch 22, and with autism in the UK. And what we did is that we made one very specific events for families and children with autism. And we had a very good participation. So we wrote another project and we got funding for some of our live event and music students to get internships. So this is work experience, and this is training, and this is everything was paid for them to become, so have 6 months of work with Catch 22 Jazz Company and get experience to go into the industry, because we know that music students have really challenges into going to industry. And we really, went for our students who have any sort of neurodiverse issues, and then we really try to encourage them, but they weren't ready, and some of them said we don't have the confidence to do that. So I think looking at, yes, higher education is really important, but what about education before higher education, where children get the confidence to grab the opportunities and don't feel, can I do this? And this is, by the way, a paid opportunity where they would even be paid for taxi to go wherever they were living at the time, up to £100. So this was a really great opportunity for somebody to take, but they didn't feel confidence to take it on. So there is sort of looking at what really works well is to understanding them very well. So bringing them onto the table and asking them what works in that situation. And a little bit of cultures and local community. I think we forget to because we're using this local community, we really lose when we just losing its kind of identity, that local community are the one who knows best what works in that area, and that goes to culture. And for accessibility, the same. People with accessibility needs also have different cultures. We should tap into understanding those cultures as well, and limitations of certain cultures. Culture of inclusion, this is really obvious, embedding the inclusive values into all that. And investing in continuous training. And I think that's something that also, there is a lot of training around inclusivity, and I actually took part in a lot of that. And I feel like it's becoming one of those issues where we think, okay, we went to one of these trainings and we know what is happening, but actually it's continuous training, because the knowledge about inclusivity, about accessibilities, about what is available is constantly changing. So if you 3 years ago attended one, training, it doesn't mean that now you know everything about it. So continuous training where you know what's happening and what are the new ways of dealing with situations like that. And I think measuring impact. So if we do things that works well, trying to be loud about it, and if understanding what really works in different settings and be open to change that. Sometimes the problem is we do get funding or we do get an idea that works, but it worked for that time and now times has changed and we have to be open to understanding now we have to make changes as well and be open to reevaluate ourselves, our approaches, and be open to change. Thank you everyone for your time. That is
without further ado or to do, I'm going to hand over to Gary.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Professor Gary Kerr. I'm delighted to be here today. I am a white male, I'm in my mid-30s. I am wearing a white shirt, blue jeans and very swanky blue suede shoes today. Today I'm going to talk about some of the work that I've done with Dr. Marika Nevin, who is just in the back here in the audience. If you want to give us a wave, Marika. Lovely. Thank you. I am based at the Atlantic Technological University, which is a 9-campus university on the west coast of Ireland, serving over 30,000 students. And at ATU, I'm the head of Marketing, Tourism and Sport, which is a random collection of subjects. I want to start off just by talking about what inspires me to undertake research into accessibility and inclusion within festivals. I'm going to, in a moment, show a short video. In the interests of time, I won't play all of the video, but I think when I'm talking about people with disabilities, it's important to bring that voice into the conversation. So I'm going to talk about Sonic Bothy, which is a Glasgow-based organisation which I've worked with for a number of years now. Until last year, I was chair of the board at Sonic Bothy. And Sonic Bothy makes new music with people with disabilities and people with additional support needs, and provides them the opportunity to compose, to create, and to perform new experimental and contemporary music. Sonic Bothy, on one hand, works with artists to help them develop those opportunities to compose, experiment, and to perform. And then on the other hand, we work with festivals and events to make sure that they are inclusive and accessible for our disabled artists and performers. So I'll just play a short video and we can hear from one of our artists.
From sessions, typically a block will run for 4.
See the time on this.
When we were in Sonic Bothy, we were playing the instruments and we were like listening to music and relaxation sometimes. Feels a bit calm. It feels a bit quiet and all that. It feels calm when you play other instruments.
More fun but more easier, because when I try and do it with other people, it's like they don't actually listen to me. I got to like play one of my songs from my playlist and I got to play it on the speaker, so I got to like sing it and just express myself. Everyone listens to me in the session.
Run space is for participants who'd be interested in taking things further, who have expressed an interest in experimental music.
I hope just in that short clip of the video you can get a sense of what Sonic Bothy is, and we run a series of workshops with people with disabilities. Ultimately, we plan to foster creativity and social engagement, and our activities are designed in a way in which they empower people with disabilities, reduce isolation, and support physical and mental well-being of our participants. And during my time as chair of the board at Sonic Bothy, it really inspired me to undertake research into how festivals can be accessible for disabled, both physical disabilities and learning disabilities, for people with neurodiverse communities, and it really inspired me to undertake sort of practice-based work, and that's why I've been delighted to partner over the years with Cheltenham Science Festival to undertake practice-based work as a festival curator. So I just want to speak about my work with Marika at the Cheltenham Science Festival. And here, this is a zone which I co-curated, and this zone was called the cyber zone traditionally, but ultimately it was about engaging people with cyber and technology. And what Marika and I did, along with our colleague Reid, was to reimagine this space so that it was more inclusive and accessible for a range of marginalised communities. And diversity and inclusion really is at the heart of the Cheltenham Science Festival, and one of our goals for the arcade was to be more accessible. We wanted people to feel included and valued within cyber security, no matter their background, their education level, their skills, or any other protected characteristics. So we co-curated this theme called the Arcade, and ultimately the goal of the Arcade was to make people feel included within science. The Arcade was themed around a seaside arcade, and for those who have been to a seaside arcade, they are places that are open for everyone. They're open for families, for single people to go into, for teenagers to be playing music on their phones, for older people just to walk into and have a cup of tea and have a look around. And in order to guide us on this journey and to be more inclusive, we had set up an inclusion advisory group who really guided us on this journey. So within this inclusion advisory group, we had Cheltenham Pride represented. We had a local women in cyber organisation, the Ladies of Cheltenham Hacking Society. We worked with Lives of Colour, an organisation here in Cheltenham for black people working in cyber. And we worked with National Star, who came in as advisors. National Star is a local further education college for young people with disabilities, and they crewed a stand, but importantly, also they guided us on our access within the arcade, and also we had some neurodiverse representation. So the Inclusion Advisory Group really guided us on the practicalities of inclusion for our communities that we really wanted to reach out to. So I just want to pick up on the National Star group that came in and helped crew a stand within the Science Festival. And there were so many lovely stories that emerged from National Star participation in the Science Festival. The Science Festival, during the daytime, we have lots of school groups come along, and we had children without disabilities come in, and in the first maybe 10 minutes we would see them just kind of walk past the young people at the stand with disabilities. They were a little bit scared to communicate, but as soon as the children at the National Star stand brought out their Xbox and they started to engage with the children without disabilities, then it really began to break down the barriers. And we could see the children with disabilities, showing the school groups that were coming in how to communicate using assisted technology, how to communicate using eye movements, for example, to type words. And it really broke down barriers, and I thought it was just such a lovely thing to see as soon as the children started learning how to communicate, then that communication was there, and they were really reluctant to leave the stand when it was time for them to go back home because they were having so much fun. I think one of the other great things about Cheltenham Science Festival is that there is a range of diverse representation amongst the volunteer community, and I think what's really important is that the disabled volunteers were able to guide the festival on accessibility. And it was really important that we have volunteers with disabilities in the arcade, so that audiences with disabilities can see volunteers with disabilities in there, being in science, being represented in science. And we think, if you can see, then you can be. And then finally, I just want to talk about, how we measured success and what feedback looked like. We wanted to understand, what we were doing well, how we could be better and, be more accessible. So we decided that no one wants to fill out a survey, when they're having fun at a festival. So we decided, in line with a seaside arcade, we would just go for some graffiti approach. We had a graffiti wall where people could just write some authentic feedback up there for us. And actually, when we think about what we wanted to know, the only one thing that we wanted feedback on was, how did it make you feel? You've come into the Science Festival, you've been in the arcade, how did you feel? So we had, this wall here that you can see, it was covered in graffiti. Each night we would take photographs of the wall, we'd paint over it so that it was ready again for the next day. And we collected 10,000 items of feedback, which my research assistant went through and coded each item of feedback. I was really worried about asking her to do this, but she actually really enjoyed doing this job. And we were able to categorize the feedback into some that was maybe not so useful and some that was actually very useful for us. So, there was lots of feedback on, who was here, who was in love with who at a particular moment of time. There was lots of references to politics and to current events. There was lots of support being shown in our wall for Ukraine. There was lots of references to LGBTQ issues and sexuality. One of the things that we did was partner with the local Pride organisation to make sure that we had representation there, through staff representation, through appropriate Pride flags being displayed, and so on. So people were using this opportunity to give feedback as an opportunity to express themselves and to come out and say, wow, I feel that, as a trans person, I'm maybe feeling ready to have a conversation with my family members. So there were lots of great items of feedback there. There were lots of references to cyber, and also, there were lots of references to disability access and inclusion. And writing all of this up is something that Marika and I are planning to do before the end of the calendar year and get it published. So we've made some steps in that. I just want to say, just in terms of how this relates to music festivals, I think, there's a lot of different things that you should be considering at your music festival. I think, we talk about the social value of being inclusive and accessible for disabled, neurodiverse and other marginalised audiences at festivals. But I think, as a professor in a business school, it would be remiss of me not to mention the actual economic benefits to the organisations of being inclusive. For example, if you're creating new offerings and new products within your festivals, then you may be able to reach an entirely new group of audiences that you're not currently engaging with. And I think, creating new bespoke offerings for communities sometimes works better than trying to adapt existing offerings that you might have there. For example, if you are, a music festival and you're wanting to better engage different communities, disabled communities in experimental music, perhaps you might offer, the opportunity for people to come along and to experiment with different instruments and so on. And I think it's important to consider how a person's impairment might affect their participation in the activity. But the ability, rather than the disability, should always be the main focus of the festival manager. And I think festival managers shouldn't be assuming abilities, but you should be guided by the participants. I just want to conclude with a final thought about governance and how governance is so important in terms of guiding accessibility and inclusion within festivals. I've been to so many festivals, not in Cheltenham, I must say, but festivals that you go onto their website or you see a strategic plan and it says inclusion is our core value, it's one of our core values, but the festival invites me along, but they never once ask me what my access requirements are. So I think from a governance perspective, it's so important to make sure that you have people holding senior management to account on your boards, that you have disabled representation on the boards, that you can be guided by disabled artists, and make sure that you have a real genuine commitment to accessibility rather than just maybe attending a training course and saying we're an inclusive organisation. So I want to stop there and thank you for allowing me the time to speak today.
Thanks, Gary. I'm going to hand over to Leon. Thank you.
Is this on? Yeah. Yeah. Well done, Gary. You actually had a video, so I think you'll win the best academic because you've actually had some visual and audio presentation. No, my name's Dr. Leon Davis. I'm a senior lecturer in events management and marketing. I'm working with Teesside University and the University of Sunderland. I'm actually here to represent myself and Dr. Alyssa Eve Brown and Dr. Christopher Hayes, who also work at Teesside and Sunderland, and we've done lots of some work on inclusion or access to live events held in sports stadiums. And before I start, my name's Leon, I am black male, I am my very, very, very late 30s, 4 months to go. I've got a black polo t-shirt on and green trousers. And yeah, so what we did, my PhD was on about fandom. So it was about fans, but it was more about fans in arenas, in multi-purpose arenas. So my PhD was on, I work with the Professional Darts Corporation to actually look at how they control the fans within all the venues in the UK, Europe and in America. But after this, or even before this, my original research was on football fans. So it really does look at fans and how they are included. Now, what I was looking at for this was that sports stadiums in today's climate, they are used as live music venues. And obviously these places used to be typically like arenas where you would host internationally renowned artists. But what has obviously happened is that these stadiums, event promoters have started seeing the economic value of looking into how much money they can make from these artists. So they've started to, as you will all know, they've started to transfer the big artists to, such as Coldplay, to football stadiums, rugby stadiums, these sports stadiums, because they can host a lot more people. So what we were looking at was what I actually noticed was when they go to these stadiums, usually they have these sports events and they can cater for persons with disabilities. And I'll say that although I say PWDs and we've written that in the research, and I have actually talked about identity first and person first language, but we wanted people to actually be a person first before their disability. So that's why we use the term PWDs. But what we sort of done is we knew that obviously Wembley used to hold a lot of events, but now places all over the UK or all over the world host these live music events. So what I did start to notice was when you have a sport event that takes place, they obviously, within the stands, there are places for persons with disabilities. But when they hold a music event, obviously they use the pitch. So we started to look at how were they actually catering for the people when they have to actually put disability platforms or different areas for persons, and that's not just physical but also neurodivergent. So what we did is, you can't see it on the slide, but We did participant and non-participant observation as researchers, myself and Alyssa, and then we also did semi-structured interviews with the stadium organisers, and then we did informal conversations with the persons with disabilities. So we probably went to, in 2023, we did this Beyonce, Pink, the Arctic Monkeys and Blur. We went to these events. We just walked around. We spent 6 to 7 hours walking around these sports stadiums. It wasn't just a freebie to see Beyonce. No, we actually were spending time probably from midday to 6 to 7 p.m. talking to these people, looking at ingress, egress, access, looking at sort of the different issues that people would have, because I've got these on my phone, but we had lots of different, we found that there were a lot of different issues, because we found that some stadiums do have good practices at catering for people in these areas, but we found that they typically were the stadiums where they might have someone who has a disability that actually works within their team. But then we also found that there were some that weren't as effective, or they had a myriad of issues, such as actually access. So for example, for the Pink concert, we had people who had the car park or the directions for the Elton John concert, so they actually didn't have the right pathways, or they didn't actually have the wayfarers to actually get to where they needed to be. Also, they had there was incorrect information on websites. There was also they didn't actually the disabled people, persons with disabilities, they didn't get any information leading up to the actual event, or they got incorrect information. So, for example, at this event, this is Beyonce, we had a person who was told that he wasn't allowed to use his mobility scooter, but then when he got to the riser, everyone else had the mobility scooter. So he was quite a large man, he said it himself, and we had 3 people trying to get him up the ramp, which is I nearly tried to help as well, but obviously because I'm not stadium man and security, I wasn't allowed to do that, but they had to help him up, and it was a case of the information wasn't correct, so it was nearly a case of he wasn't embarrassed about this. He was like, well, they nearly had to winch me up like a whale. That's what he said, but which he found funny, but we were sort of like, this is concerning, but it was just a case of incorrect information that he was told, but he actually said that the day before at Sam Fender at St James's Park it was worse. So we have there's lots of different issues in terms of the actual information that is provided to these people. So I think what we also found as well is that we called it non-participant observation because we don't have a disability, so we can't say that we could experience this, but we can actually ask these people about their experiences, and obviously we could say what we saw. We've one of the few sort of studies to look at, really, we're trying to pioneer informal conversations, because we believe that that's the best way to communicate with people at live events at the time, rather than it being post-event when it's quite nostalgic and they might be influenced by their experience afterwards, or they might look at it. So we try to do it live. Obviously the artist has not come on, so that could be an ethical issue, but we did find that these people in these areas, particularly on the pitch, were saying thank you for speaking to us, because nobody ever comes up to us and asks us any questions. We don't get asked anything. We literally just get plonked here, and then we just get asked if we want a drink. So we actually found that people did want to converse with us, whether it was the actual person with the disability or their companion or assistant. So what we found, we also found as well that there was the toilet access as well. So you found people on the pitch would actually use a toilet that was actually catered for the person with disabilities, but because the queue was smaller, they would actually use that toilet instead. So it became quite a bit of a mess. Now, linked to this, obviously this picture is just of the pitch, but we also then went to these, with the access that we got from the stadium organisers, we also went to we looked at neurodivergence. So we actually looked at, do you have any areas for sensory issues? So some stadiums did and some didn't. Some had just converted a hospitality box and said, well, there's a hospitality box there that they can use. If you don't like sound, they can go inside. We also found that the difference in the stadiums. So we have stadiums that are from the English Football League or from the Rugby Premiership, for example, which would have different charters from the Premier League stadiums. So there were certain stadiums where they would actually have catered for people with sensory issues, and they would actually have designated rooms for different people, but also they literally just said, well, we don't have to adhere to this with the charter, or this is not something that we have to do at the moment. Maybe when we get into the Premier League, then we'll have to do that, but at the moment that's not something that we're thinking about. There was also the issue between the stadium organisers and the event promoters and what they wanted. So we started to look at sight lines and looking at were there people obviously looking at sign language, etc., and actually on stage and side stage access as well. What we tended to find though was that it's on there that we sort of looked at these adaptations, and we were really looking at some people are doing this. Attitudes is Everything is working on this as well. We know they're doing this in a different way, but we also do have some people with disabilities that are actually putting these reviews of these stadiums online about their experiences and how they've experienced that. And what we wanted to do was obviously, as academics, was try to showcase this in the academic field. So we're looking at, myself and Alyssa are writing a moment, we're writing a couple of papers on just looking at the accessibility and the provisions at these stadiums, and we think that there's an inconsistency between different stadiums. We looked at the north of England, but we think that there's an inconsistency across the UK, particularly obviously with the different sizes of stadiums and the fact that, like we said, there's different sports. So we might have Lancashire County Cricket Ground, also known as Old Trafford Cricket Ground, compared to Norwich City's Aviva Stadium, which hosts events as well, which hosts the Arctic Monkeys as well. So we're just trying to look at, can there be some sort of more consistency or some sort of standardisation in how they actually cater for persons with disabilities, not just physical but also sensory, because people having very different experiences from one venue to another, and because most of these places, they're not purpose built for these events. Now, some of the new stadiums, such as Tottenham Hotspur, they are now multi-purpose stadiums rather than just sports stadiums, but they still are not fully able to understand or cater for different disabilities. So we were looking at how can they do that, or how can they look at being more consistent, or having some sort of, if there was a charter or there's something that they could do where they could all adhere to a certain pathway that would help people of all disabilities. Thank you.
So, I'm just going to do a little update on my research, because I'm conscious that I presented here last year, so I talked about what I was doing, and as part of that we installed a haptic dance floor. I say I'm pointing at the floor like it was here, it was actually down the road. But so I'm going to do this very briefly just to ensure that I've been able to give you an update and then to leave a bit of space for questions at the end. So my projects that I've been working on with colleagues, Mandy, who is here, and also Adam from University of Brighton, have been looking at augmented performances using haptic technologies. So we've been working with two technologies, the Beatblocks haptic floor and then also haptic vests, and the piece with haptic vests we've been doing with Def Rave. So the first thing that we did was brought the floor and the vests down to Falmouth. We had an event over several days, and we kind of trialled and experimented with the floor, and we played music through it at live music performances, but equally we played the sound of two different species of South Atlantic seal through the floor to see what they, underwater, to see what they felt like, what vibrations that the seals created felt like on the floor. So being on a vibrational floor is a different experience for different people. Some people feel it in their feet, which sort of seems like the obvious place you would. However, some people don't feel it in their feet, they only feel it in their chest. And a few people say they feel it on the back of their neck only. For me, it's a bit of a sort of transient experience. So one of the seals blows some bubbles, and I feel the bubbles going up my legs. I can feel the vibrations. And then when the bubbles pop, I kind of feel them dissipating. It's a very strange and interesting experience. We invited a group of sixth form students from the Deaf Academy who are based in Exmouth. We brought them down. We put on an 8-piece female vocal band. Sorry, I felt like I nearly hit you in the face then. And those guys had, you know, most of them hadn't been to a live music performance before because they said, because what's the point, was what a lot of them were saying. But actually, it felt like a real kind of gateway experience for them. They were kind of tentative at first in terms of engaging with the technology, but by the end of it, they were so excited. So the picture, I've got a couple of pictures here. The first one is of a group of deaf attendees enjoying an 8-piece female vocal band, going crazy, waving their phones in the air. It's out of focus because obviously the floor is vibrating, so it's quite hard to take a photo that's in focus. The other picture here is of a group, it's the same group. We also did some DJ workshops with them with Def Rave. And within that, they worked with the haptic vests. So we were really inspired by that, and we thought about the possibilities of the technology. So the next thing we did was that Mandy and I accompanied Def Rave to Boomtown Fair, and they did a 6-hour takeover in the incredibly sunny weather, and we did 6 hours of asking people to fill in questionnaires, which I'm now wishing we'd had a graffiti wall, actually. Because it got people's opinions on the technology as they tried the haptic vest and then told us what they thought. As the day progressed, their opinions became increasingly perhaps harder to interpret, shall we say. But nevertheless, we then went to Deaf Rave Festival at Rich Mix in Shoreditch. We did some more research there with the vests. And then last year, we brought the floor out to 3 festivals. So we came here to Cheltenham Jazz Festival, installed the floor for a couple of days, worked with National Star and other organisations. So the image is here. You've got some participants from National Star who are enjoying the floor. Because we'd had such a tough time with our questionnaires previously, questionnaires are also difficult if it's dark. There's a whole range of issues with them. Originally, I wanted to do them online, but then there wasn't any coverage in some of the festivals, so we ended up with paper ones. So we decided we'd have a new sounded a bit ominous. Decided we'd have a new approach. So we tried a technique called photo elicitation. So we took photos of individuals with their permission, enjoying the floor, and then we kind of asked them questions about it afterwards. And actually, that was really insightful. So this lady here in the red top, who's holding her arms up. I can't play guitar. I'm pretending to play guitar. She's holding her arms up as if she was playing guitar, although that wasn't necessarily immediately obvious from the photo. However, we said to her, pick some photos and tell us what you were doing. And she said, this is a photo of me playing electric guitar because this haptic floor is, without a doubt, the best electric guitar machine in the world. Because air guitar, not electric guitar. Did I say air guitar originally, or did I just go down electric? Apologies, I'm trying to rush. The best air guitar machine in the world, because she said, because as you're pulling this sort of rock star stance, you can feel the vibrations from the guitar you're not actually playing coming up through your into your body, however you experience it. So that was a really kind of successful approach to doing the research. This is an image from Tropical. We went to Tropical Pressure, and we also went to Chaka Khan's Meltdown at the South Bank. So this is a picture from Tropical Pressure of a mother and baby. Lots of people, when they engage with the floor, they like to sort of sit on it or touch it, or, you know, it's not just about standing on it. One of my favourite films from last year is from Gilson, who's here with us. He took a film scanning attendees' access to music last year whilst they were on the floor, and he looked at me and I smiled at him and he went, wow, do you remember? It was a brilliant film. So people engage with the technology in different ways. It's really interesting and kind of makes you wonder about the future of music and the future of how people will engage across the piece with music. And that's kind of stuck with us, that wondering thing. So we are in the process of doing more research. We're just putting a bid in very imminently called Music You Can Touch, which is intending, if it's successful, to commission 4 composers to make music that actually responds to the technology. Because at the moment we're playing music that's been made without considering the technology. So we want to try and facilitate some music that responds to it. There is a project in Holland where the guys are trying to create a new art form. They're trying to create a vibrational art form, and they're working with composers to make vibrational artworks, which is super interesting, but not what we're doing. We're trying to make music and music as a genre more accessible. So that compositional piece is really kind of key and important to that. We're also then interested in maybe having an exhibition. We're looking at, if we're successful with the composition bid, ways of touring the compositions once they're made. We've got some interest from Canada, some interest from France and Belgium. It's quite exciting. So that's what we're doing. So we're super interested in talking to you guys about it. Any questions or comments, anyone that's interested in getting involved. I have left 4 minutes for questions. Sorry, I did rush. Does anyone have... So thank you for listening to... Oh, shouldn't have done that. Thank you for listening to my little update. Does anyone have any questions for our lovely panel? Oh, yes. Sorry, pointing's rude, and I just pointed at you. I apologise. I'll have a word with myself afterwards.
Thank you. Dr. Davis, thank you for sharing your research. I can see a great opportunity here for disabled people to sue venues. I don't know if there's any legal people in the room, but seriously, I think one of the main ways we can affect change is by suing and getting new case law, because we don't have that much case law at the moment, to set the standards of what stadiums should do. I think a key for this would be communicating your research to disabled people, and I wonder, and this is a question for all the panel, do you have plans to publish your research in accessible formats? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I don't know if we've got any legal representation in the room. The first thing, the stadiums wanted, they did actually want impact reports, so they gave us funding to do we wrote reports, myself and Alyssa wrote a number of reports for different stadiums, so we looked into, we actually were critical about what they were doing, and so they could, and then we sort of had a debrief with them as well to say, look, these are the issues that we found, and we don't just want to send it to you, we want to tell you in person. So yeah, they said that they take that on board, but then said you can't come back next year. No, they didn't say that, but they more or less said, look, we understand you won't do it next year, but they understood that they could take those issues away because they didn't want to keep being criticised. So it's more, I think it's definitely what we sort of were leading to was looking towards the UK sports councils, or looking towards legislation, actually moving it towards legislation, but supported by our research and our findings.
Which would then create a situation where, presumably, where it's, I'm not a lawyer, where it's easier to sue on, because if there's a standard expectation across the piece, across all these different formats, it would then be easier to say, well, hang on a minute, the law says this, and...
What we have is the Equality Act, which
Yeah.
is quite vague, but very useful in its vagueness. But I think your evidence actually shows quite clearly that they're in breach of the legislation we already have. And what a lot of people struggle with is the energy and the time to put that evidence together. So I think that's really fantastic. You've got that evidence base. You just need disabled communities to be able to read and understand that research and use it to their advantage. So that's why I was asking about accessible formats, such as publishing PSL interpretive videos, publishing easy read versions, because academia is quite a hard thing for the normal person to get into.
Yeah, I'd definitely say that we were looking at doing it in the summer and doing, like I said, and doing it in a different way to actual reports and academic papers, because like you said, there's different ways in which we can present this and different ways that people will be able to relate to this, not just persons with disabilities, but also what these organisations try to do is they try to put on like a symposium, or they try to put on like a sort of a talks with the people who are disabled, to say that they've had these sessions. That's what they try to do to get around this.
So that's a really interesting topic we could definitely discuss over lunch, because we have hit our... I'm tasked with bringing us back on time. So thank you so much for that question. I'm sorry that we didn't have time for more. As universities, not just the colleagues that are here, but all 56 members of AMI are really interested in working with yourselves if you have these kind of sort of research questions, because clearly the more of an evidence base that we can garner, the more compelling it will be, and the better for the purpose that you've just described. So thanks, everyone. Enjoy your lunches.
Thank you again, Adrian, Anahita, Gary and Leon. Thank you very much. 10 seconds between you and lunch. Hopefully you all know where the lunch options are, so whether it's the cafe here or the wonderful facilities around the Minster area here of Cheltenham, please go and enjoy the fine fare that we've got available for you. We're going to be back in this room for a wonderful performance by Inkfest. Thanks very much to Music Works, who will be performing in about half an hour. So if you want to grab yourself some food, take a break, come back in here, and we're going to get kicked back off with some performances and our next set of speeches. See you shortly.